Let's have a quick chat. Okay, it's very late. And as an immigrant, I really cannot count the number of times that I've been labeled as being greedy because we want more for ourselves or being like selfish. And initially, I used to find this really difficult to accept because I never looked at myself as greedy. But the more I thought about it, I realized that there's a paradox. There's a very thin line between being labeled as greedy or selfish and being ambitious, driven, or purposeful. And then on the other line, there is the very thin line between contentment and laziness. These four phrases could mean something different to different people. My first lesson came early on coming to the UK. I'm an immigrant, by the way. And I remember when I came to the UK as a 21-year-old. I'll give you guys a quick backstory, okay? I learned a few lessons very early on about greed, about being driven, and about just contentment. Now, if you are used to the way the UK works as a student, back then, and I think it's the same thing now, you are normally entitled to 20 hours of work. So when I came, I met somebody who I'll call like a big brother. We were in the same course, and I happened to be one of the youngest doing this course at the time. And he took me under his wings. His name was Adekunle. He was a lot older. He had a family. He'd left in Nigeria, a wife and 2 kids, yes. And he always helped me. Like he was like my neighbor, like my big brother. And so imagine that you guys come in September. He told me how to get an NI number. He showed me the ropes. Anywhere he went to, he'll take me along. Okay. The first lesson I learned was, this is never a sprint. Let me tell you why I thought so. He realized that it was December, so we came in September looking for jobs. We had some casual jobs in October, and by November, December, we're all struggling to get permanent jobs. And he called me one day after school. He said, come. He said, this is Christmas. There's loads of casual work with loads of hours in the shops. Back then, to work like in retail was not a bad idea at all. So we went to Astera. He took some forms. Back then we had the manual forms where you had to fill out. And he filled out his form, gave me one, I filled mine out, and we deposited it. And we went. He took me there. The next morning I got a call and he didn't. I was so sad for him, and I said, oh my God, you took me there. Why? And he said, why are you bothered? It's not, he said, everybody has a time. And there is a purpose for this. Don't worry. But I was feeling so guilty. I went for an interview. And the next day, I remember asking him in a classroom. I said, any updates? And then there's this guy. He was a Brit, a white British boy. He was in our class. And he just found everything we did as a problem. And that was the first day I was called greedy. Now, I was just, talking to him, and he overheard, and I said, oh my God, I got this call. I've been scheduled for an interview. I'm quite nervous, And the guy said, he just burst out. He said, all I hear from you guys is work, work, work. You guys are the most greedy, selfish people I've ever met. We all are contented with the money the government gives us. The money the government gives us, we can attend classes. We don't have to grab all the jobs. And I was just like, huh? And he had a big tantrum. And I thought, really? Me working in a shop? You think that I'm being greedy? And I said to him, I said, hang on. So what money are you on about? He's like, oh, the bursary, the fees. I scolded this young man. He was 23. And I said, do you realize that we pay premium fees? At the time, my fees was 10,000 and his was 3,000 pounds. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'm an international student. I've come from overseas. My fees is 10,000 pounds for a year. He's like, oh, what about the government student loan? I said, we're not entitled to. I saw his face fall. said, so how do you all get your fees? And I explained to him that our parents or we have to work for it. And we had a long conversation. By the end, this guy was almost in tears. He said, I'm so sorry. You've scolded me. And I'm sorry. And I turned. I said, you call me selfish, greedy for working in the shops. I said, let me tell you something. Where I come from, before I came here, I would not even consider working in the shops back home because of my education and my background. When I come here to do this, we feel like we're beneath the level. But we do it. It's not about greed, it's about ambition because we have to pay our fees. It's the sacrifice we have to make. And the next thing that I learned, which is so important, is a story. I got this job. It was December time, so they were taking a lot of new recruits. I made friends with this young man who was like another big brother. He was maybe in his mid-20s. He was from, please guys, don't take this story as a way to castigate a particular country origin. He was South African. And we were friends. He always advised me. And he kept saying, why are you working here? I said, it's a best option. I'm a student. I have only 20 hours. He said, you deserve more. He kept saying you deserve more. And sometimes we'll sit lunch because he was privileged to work in management in the security team. So if you've ever worked in retail, it might be different now. I've not worked in retail for almost 18 years or 19 years. Back then, they actually collected a lot of cash and they put them in these containers and passed them through a particular place, and he went to a safe room. And he was one of those people in security who will go around with the other managers and collect the money every day, take it to the bank. So he said, oh, I deserve more. I have a lot of pressure. You know, we are Africans. We have demands. And I kept thinking, why is this lad or this man always complaining? I said, but it's a good option for now. Anyway, he kept saying that. I was so naive. And if you've ever worked in retail, the most busy time is just before Christmas. Like the last week before Christmas. And that was my first retail job in the UK. It was so busy. They had collected all of the money for the week, for the week, and we closed for Christmas and the went. And we all went home. Guess what? The 2nd of Jan, I went back to work, and that was the first time I had my first attack, racist attack, because of how I looked and because I was a foreigner. Guess what happened? This money that was collected for the whole week, this man somehow arranged, had bought his flight. He had planned this for months. I used to sit down with him during lunchtime and he'll have calls from back home. He was under pressure constantly. And he planned everything. I say it and I have goosebumps because I felt like that was the biggest mistake he made. But this is where we talk about greed and contentment. And he was involved. And the next day, after the Christmas break, they came back to an empty safe. He'd taken thousands, I cannot even tell you guys now, this is 20 years ago, and disappeared into thin air. Every agency in the world was alerted because he was a fugitive. And we had no idea. We came back to work and I remember people talking, saying things behind our backs before we realized that we were being attacked because they felt like we were other immigrants who could do something similar. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, it was my first lesson. And I started learning contentment. I said, we all want to be ambitious. We all want to strive for more. We all can give more. We can get more. But where do you draw the line? Where does your moral standing divide you from being greedy, from being selfish, from being ambitious, and from being contented? Again, being an immigrant, we don't really come to mess about. I've said this before. We come with a purpose. We come because we need to make ends meet. And if sometimes we do that and forget about our moral standing, that is where I consider us greedy or selfish. But generally, as a race or as a group of people, immigrants are extremely ambitious, extremely driven. And I don't want people labeling us as greedy, because guess what? The next minute they're calling us lazy because we are on benefits. There are people who, when they see foreigners, they just think our money is going, our benefits. There's certain people, certain origins where they're looked at as being, always grabbing free stuff, always want to take benefits. And then you have the others who are striving for more, who are driven, who are always working, and they label us greedy. I always try not to respond to my comments because it doesn't really matter. But a few people deliberately keep going under comments and referring to a lot of us as greedy. Go back to your country. We built this economy. When I say we, people from the brainwashed generations, from the Caribbean, who emigrated back in the day like slaves from Africa, we built this country. We have this. We contribute. We pay our taxes. We are hardworking. We pay into the economy like students before we get to where we are. We don't just get it by luck. We get it by hard work. So let nobody make you feel guilty. This is just a motivation today. If this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, my name is Lulu. This is Lulu Diaries, and I'll see phone was not charged. So I hope that this resonates with somebody. If it does, share it to somebody who is an immigrant. I do videos like this, motivational videos, and hopefully I can impact one person watching to say, do not feel discouraged. Keep your focus, but learn contentment. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye. Bye.